Welcome, everybody. We're here for another edition of our Qualitative Conversations. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Kristin Black, who will be talking about a course she's teaching for us this summer at the Qualitative Research Summer Intensive. And that course is titled Equity-Centered Approaches to Qualitative Research. We'll get more into that through our conversation today. I'm Maietta, president of ResearchTalk. And also joining us is Jeff Petrozelli, ResearchTalk's Qualitative Research Specialist. Jeff?
Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Jeff with Research Talk. Been here since 2001.
And also our partner at the Odom Institute, Paul Mijas, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ray. I'm Paul Mijas. I'm a qualitative researcher and consultant at the Odom Institute at UNC Chapel Hill, and I've also been with Research Talk as a consultant for over 20 years.
Oh, great. And the course that Kristin's teaching is July 24th, 25th online. Just as FYI, at the end of this recording, there will be a slide that will have information on where to learn more about the course and how to register. So Kristin, if you can give us a little bit of an introduction, and then I'll guide you through, and Jeff and Paul will come in, and just some prompts to let people know more about what's happening on July 24th and 25th as you present the course.
Nice. Well, thank you, Ray. It's really exciting to talk to you all about this course, which I've taught a couple of times, but I think it's particularly interesting on how we're going to be approaching this course in the times that we're in, when there's lots of restrictions on health equity work and DEI. But the whole premise of this course is really to really think through how can you try to integrate equity practices and approaches in all aspects of your qualitative research, from idea generation to dissemination. And I wanted to share this course with folks because I think we often think about health equity in terms of like measurement or how we're looking at outcomes, but we also need to be thinking about it in how we approach our research from the jump. And so through the course, we're going to be talking through all the different pieces and aspects of research when it comes to qualitative research, and like what ways can we take more equitable approaches, anti-racist approaches to the work that we do.
And if you could just let us know in essence, kind of why are you teaching this course, or a little bit of intro background, and then we'll get right back into substance for the course.
Yeah, so I'm currently an assistant professor at UNC Chapel Hill in the Gillings School of Global Public Health. And my background is I'm in the departments of maternal child health and health behavior, but my background is in looking at maternal health equity and also conducting community-based participatory research, which has been like a core aspect of my research since I was a student learning. I had the great fortune of being taught by some of the greatest, some legends within the field in terms of public health and equity, including Jeannie Ng and Diane Raleigh and Vijaya Hogan. And so through my work with them as a student, I really learned about how equity shows up in our work that we do, how can we be more equitable, and then also how to measure different outcomes so that we're looking at how can we make these disparities that we're seeing, try to eliminate them to some degree, address them in different ways that are kind of unique approaches. And so I've continued to integrate that into the way that I work and the research that I do, always trying to look at racial equity approaches and how I can incorporate that. And then also how can I be really in alignment with what CBPR is really about, which is like centering the voices and also the expertise of the communities that we work with.
Great. And methodology is a tenet that runs through all of you do. I love reading your work and listening to you talk about it, and how you just kind of see it as a necessity, not as a checklist item, but for folks to know that, and more witness to your methods expertise, as you are also a member of the ResearchTalk consulting team.
I am. I didn't leave that out on purpose. Yeah, I'm part of the ResearchTalk team. I've been helping out with the qualitative research summer intensives for about 4 years now, but also been a consultant for a while and a long time learner through ResearchTalk. So yeah, qualitative is like my bread and butter. I always tell people like I'm trained in epi, but I really love doing qualitative work the most. And so all the work that I do tends to be like mixed methods or qualitative heavy.
So when we think about this particular course, equity-centered approaches to qualitative research, and let's get kind of real sleeves rolled up, working and getting stuff going. What will someone get who sits through this online course with you? So just kind of like, first off, hey, here's a power takeaway for you.
So, well, the power takeaway would be, well, it's going to give people some opportunity and time to really reflect on the practices that they're doing now and how can they improve them. Um, I think one thing that's going to be different than previous courses, and I'm really going to take more integration of thinking through, like, how can you do it in times like that when you can't always say those words? You can't say racism and equity and all these key things. And so how can we just ingrain that into the practices? So it's just like, I always talk about like how do you automate equity? So it's not just something that you're have to actively tell people, but you're just doing it. That's going to be like the way that we're going to go through it, is like thinking what you're doing now. How can we improve those? What are ways that we can think together to think about how can we make what we're doing and enhance it? And it's not just a course where you sit back and listen. It's definitely some active participation and some co-learning experience where people in the group actually learn from each other too on things that they're already doing that are really great approaches.
Wonderful. And of course, in our environment, just so folks know, we are open conversations. So there are no restrictions, but absolutely the folks who learn with us in these courses, they have to pay attention to what's happened currently. I love your language, automate equity. So this is something that is real time for you, for us. So you're kind of thinking through the course already and how to integrate it to our current situation. This must
Yeah.
be kind of, I can almost sense the wheels turning from here.
Yeah, it's it's recent developments, but it's like something we should be talking about anyways, because there's always attacks on health equity work, and especially verbalizing it like openly. I was like, I'm still thinking through for myself how that's going to look for my research trajectory over the couple of years. And I know others may be doing that too. So I think it's important that we really reflect the times. Like if something's going down that is going against our work, we need to figure out how to still do that work um, maybe in different ways, but that are meaningful and that are honest to our practices and our core beliefs around work, which is me is public health.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love it. It's the meaningfulness and then honest to our work. It's beautiful. Jeff, when you're thinking through this course and the conversation with Kristin, tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah, I just wanted to step back a little bit and just acknowledge that we do hear this word equity more and more every day in the media, social media, everywhere, and I'm not sure it's always used correctly. So first, I did want to ask you, what do we mean by equity? If you can give us kind of a working definition, but also what does equity look like in qualitative research? What are some examples of how we can make research more equitable?
Those are great questions. Would expect nothing less from Jeff to get us in that direction. So, in terms of equity, when I talk about equity, I'm thinking about how do we approach the work that we do so we're meeting people where they're at and that we're not trying to achieve um, equal product or equal interventions or programming for the same groups of people, that we're saying like this group might need something different in order to reach this ideal level of health. A lot of times when we talk about this work before, it's like health disparities. And health disparities is just talking about differences. We're saying that there's a difference in between the outcomes we're seeing. Whereas equity, we're saying that not only are there differences, but there's some inequitable way or something that's occurring that's causing these outcomes to show up the way that they are. And so when I'm thinking about equity approaches, we're thinking about tailoring the work that we do or the interventions or the programs to the group so that they can reach an ideal level and that everyone's moving up. I think one thing that people mistake when we talk about equity, that is just for marginalized populations. But the fact is that when we have equitable approaches in some of the systems that we see, namely for me would be like hospital healthcare, that when you improve equity practices or incorporate them into the systems, that you're going to see an improvement for all people because you're making the system better from its core. When I talk about equity, I do that because people think it's, of course, we want the marginalized groups or historically systematically marginalized groups may have outcomes that are poor or lower than some other groups. And so the way that we approach programming with them or interventions with them are going to be different. So they're trying to catch up and go beyond. And also when we're thinking about equity, we're thinking about not only are everyone is improving, but that difference in outcomes between those with the lower or more adverse health outcomes compared to those who have better outcomes are like minimized or eliminated, which is really the goal if you're thinking about equity.
So when we look through enrollment and folks in the course, there is a large percentage of the folks who take the course who are involved in research on these matters. But when I have been lucky enough to kind of sit through and listen to your material, I always wonder, it's really so beneficial for any qualitative researcher, and we would love to welcome folks who aren't slated to do or currently doing work directly in this zone. So if you could just let us know a little bit about why should any qualitative researcher, I graduated from should make it a must, but yeah. What about the course is going to be really powerful and beneficial for folks who aren't lined up with work that's kind of concretely located in this area?
Yeah, well, the thing about this course is that we're not necessarily talking about health outcomes or outcomes and trying to achieve equity in those outcomes, but thinking about like practices, like what aspects of research can we improve upon so that we are engaging the right groups. We are thinking through how can we recruit or involve the right people. So like an example, let me give a solid example would be like one thing we talk about is like who's at the table. It's a common concept in community-based participatory research of thinking through who should be there to help with the research and the study and how would you involve community in those conversations from the get-go. And so we talk about like, okay, if you want to equitable practices in um your who's at your table or who's on your research group, that you can all think about, okay, who are those community members or organizations that should be there to help develop these questions. But then also you can think about how can I involve students or faculty that may be like underrepresented in academia and involve them in the research so that you're helping promote their career or they're getting experience and things like that to improve. And so sometimes people think in a bubble, they only want the people that, do the same work as them or look like them or have some commonalities with. But we have to kind of think if we're doing equitable approaches, we need to think about, okay, who's often left out of this kind of sphere of influence, and how can we kind of nullify that by bringing in folks that would benefit from being a part of it. Also, we talk about like our interview guides and how you can think through language and other ways so that you're being more inclusive in the way in your approaches, and that you're making thinking through like how can your questions be relatable to a wide group of folks, of course within the scope of what your research is about. And so like really being careful about the language that you use. So there's also, we talk about dissemination practices and how we go beyond just, which is getting better now, but going beyond just publications, but really listening to community partners, reaching different groups, figuring out how that can look for different projects, even in the questions we ask. So even from the start, we think about like the questions we ask and how we can be complying with the practices of like academia or the world or our federal government, and that we don't really look at how the approaches and who we're including and all that, and what questions we ask are really from a space of trying to achieve equity. So there's lots of ways we can think about it.
It's beautiful. It's really kind of sells the content in a way where lots of folks take professional development courses and methodology thinking this is a one-off for what I'm doing currently, but really you're enriching people's experience in their career trajectory and the way that they think about it. Sounds not just research, but the content of what they're writing, what they're teaching, and also whether it's qual, quant, mixed methods, whatever it might be. It's just that form of empowerment. I can't compliment you enough on, and thank you for bringing that to our event. I wanted to actually invite Paul into the conversation. So yeah, Paul, what's on your mind?
So I love how this course sort of addresses equity within the entire life cycle, research life cycle.
Mhm.
And I know that sharing research findings with participants can be challenging. I wonder how this course can help prepare researchers find language to connect with a wider community.
Mm-hmm. No, that's important to think through. One thing we do talk about is like, and I share some of my own practices of how we do what we call member checking, or involving your participants at different points in the process so that you're getting the additional feedback. So you're not just like taking their data and like analyzing yourself, but really having their input in how you are even talking about what was learned, so that it's relatable to them and other people who would have similar experiences, but then also talking to them about how they would want to disseminate it to wider populations that are important to them. So that could be like actual community groups, it could be particular organizations, it could be other ways. And so um, I think that's important in your practices too, is that with equity is like thinking through like who needs to hear this and how can I make a greater impact beyond just other folks in my field. And so we do talk about that, and I think that's important thing to do. It's just like the whole premise of this is like being intentional about what you do, not just like going with the flow and doing things as usual, but like how can we think through better about how our work it can be impactful, and more like equity centered,
Mhm.
which is the title of the course.
Exactly. So as we kind of move toward conclusion, it's great. Every turn of this conversation, you've really provided like this practical edge. And it's just so you have an elegant way about doing what you do in your research work in a way that is absolutely and right on point methodologically from a principle to theoretical way, but doing so in and working with students and working with colleagues and working with community members in your projects where the approach is accessible and practical. So that I know people are going to get it as a takeaway. If you were to think about kind of one major overall, it doesn't even have to be related to content. Is there a kind of any extra added benefit to sitting through this course that someone kind of and thinking about their current work, their future work, whatever it might be? You know, I have a couple ideas in mind, but I'm not going to lead the witness.
Right. I know you might have some better ideas than I have right now to think through. Um, what would I say to that? Well, it's like reflection. Like we often don't have time to just sit through and think through like what we're doing and why.
Yeah.
Um, and that this just gives you time to do that. And in your qualitative work, I think people just you learn what you learn and you just like go with the flow. And some people just do the same things over and over again without any rhyme or reason. It's just like that's the way they're taught. That's the way they've always done it. And so like being able to have time to take a step back and say, like, okay, I'm doing this, but is there a way that I can approach this from a lens, like an anti-racism lens or an equity lens, or a way that I'm really instilling justice in my work? That's a helpful practice. And I don't think everyone takes time to do that. So this course allows you that time.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Always wonderful. And we know you'll be doing a couple other events during the summer, but it's wonderful to have you as part of the team. And we're really looking forward to this particular course. So thank you so much. And thank you to Jeff and Paul as well. And yeah, so thank you, Kristen.
Thank you all.